The invitation sat on my desk, cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing, the same stationery my father had used to write my disavowalment letter 15 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Please join us for dinner at the Harrison family estate," it read. "Your presence is urgently requested." My assistant, Marcus, watched as I turned the invitation over in my hands. "Are you going to go?" I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the Manhattan skyline from my corner office. "What do you think, Marcus? After 15 years of silence, they suddenly want a family dinner." My name is Olivia Harrison, though I haven't used that last name since I was 22. Back then, I was just the rebellious older daughter who dared to question my father's business practices. Now, I'm Olivia Chin, CEO of Phoenix Industries, one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the world. And I just signed the papers to buy out Harrison Technologies, my family's failing company. "The merger documents are ready," Marcus said, placing a thick folder on my desk. "Everything's set for next week's board meeting." I nodded, still staring at the invitation. "Have you seen the latest numbers from Harrison Tech?" Marcus pulled up a tablet, scrolling through reports. "Stock's down 60% from last year. Your sister's latest product launch was a disaster. Rumors are they won't make payroll next month." Jessica, my perfect younger sister, who'd always done everything right in our father's eyes. The one he'd chosen to run the company, claiming she had the right temperament for leadership. The same sister who hadn't spoken a word in my defense when he'd thrown me out. "Book me a flight to Boston," I said finally. "Let's see what they want." The Harrison estate hadn't changed in 15 years. Same manicured lawns, same imposing stone facade, same sense of old money and older expectations. As my car pulled up the circular driveway, I saw other vehicles already parked. Jessica's Range Rover, my father's Bentley. Marcus had insisted on having a car wait for me, just in case, he'd said. Smart man. The butler, not the same one from my childhood, opened the door before I could knock. "Miss Harrison," he greeted me formally. "Miss Chen," I corrected him. His eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. "Of course. My apologies, Ms. Chen. The family is waiting in the study." The study, where all important Harrison family decisions were made, where my father had told me I was no longer welcome in his house or his company. I straightened my Chanel jacket and followed the butler down the familiar hallway. Family photos lined the walls. Jessica's graduation, her wedding, her taking over as CEO. My face was conspicuously absent, all traces of my existence carefully removed. The study door was open. Inside, my father sat behind his massive desk, looking older than I remembered but still radiating authority. Jessica perched on the leather sofa, her designer outfit not quite hiding her nervous fidgeting. And in a corner, my mother sat silently, just as she had the day I left. "Olivia," my father said, standing. "Thank you for coming." I remained in the doorway, not quite entering their space. "Well, when the great Richard Harrison requests your presence, how can you refuse?" Jessica flinched at my tone. Father's jaw tightened, but he pressed on. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." I chose an armchair near the door, crossing my legs and waiting. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, my father spoke. "We're aware of your success in recent years." I raised an eyebrow. "My success? You mean building a billion-dollar company from scratch while you were grooming Jessica to run Harrison Tech into the ground?" "Olivia, please," my mother spoke for the first time. "We're trying to have a civil conversation." "Civil?" I laughed. "Like the civil way you all sat there while father threw me out, or the civil way you've pretended I don't exist for 15 years? Jessica stood up suddenly. "We made mistakes, okay? Is that what you want to hear? We were wrong." I studied my sister, really looked at her for the first time. The perfect blonde hair was styled as immaculately as ever, but there were shadows under her eyes, tension in her shoulders. Running a failing company didn't look good on her. "Why am I here?" I asked, turning back to my father. He sighed heavily, looking every bit his 65 years. "Harrison Technologies is in trouble. We need your help." And there it was. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement of the pain they caused. Just another business transaction. My help? I kept my voice neutral. "What kind of help?" "We've seen what you've done with Phoenix Industries," he said. "The innovation, the growth. We need that kind of thinking at Harrison Tech." I thought about the merger documents waiting in my briefcase, about the months of careful planning that had led to this moment. And what exactly are you offering? A partnership, Jessica jumped in. Co-CEO position. Equal say in the company's direction. I almost laughed. They had no idea how close they were to having no say at all. Let me get this straight, I said, standing. For 15 years, I was the family disappointment, the one who didn't understand business, the one who wasn't worthy of the Harrison name. But now that you're failing, suddenly I'm good enough. That's not fair, Jessica protested. Things are different now. Different? I turned to her. Different how? Because you failed at the job you were handed on a silver platter. Because you couldn't handle the responsibility you were so sure you deserved. Enough, my father's voice cracked like a whip. We're offering you a chance to come home, Olivia. To be part of the family again. I reached for my briefcase, pulling out the merger documents. That's a generous offer, Dad, but I have a counter-proposal. I placed the papers on his desk, watching as he picked them up. His face went pale as he read. What is this? The future of Harrison Technologies, I said calmly. Phoenix Industries has been buying shares through various subsidiaries for months. As of next week's board meeting, we'll own controlling interest in your company. Jessica grabbed the papers from our father's hands, her eyes scanning frantically. This is impossible. You can't. Can't what? I asked. Can't outmaneuver the mighty Harrisons? Can't build something bigger and better than you? Can't take everything you thought was yours? My father stood up, his face red with anger. You planned this. All of it. No, Dad, you planned this. The moment you decided Jessica was more worthy of your trust, your love, your legacy, you set this in motion. I just learned from your example. We'll fight this, he threatened. We have lawyers. Yes, you do, I agreed. The same lawyers who helped me structure this deal. Turns out loyalty can be bought. Another lesson I learned from you. The silence in the study was deafening. My mother had gone completely still, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Jessica looked like she might be sick. And my father, he just kept staring at the merger documents like they might somehow change if he glared at them long enough. The board meeting is next Tuesday, I said, standing up. I suggest you take the weekend to come to terms with this. Please, my mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. Olivia, we're your family. I turned to her, feeling the old pain surface. Family? Where was this family when Dad threw me out? When Jessica took everything that should have been shared between us? When I was struggling to build something of my own? You never needed our help, Jessica said quietly. Look at what you've built. I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. You think Phoenix Industries happened by magic? I worked 18-hour days for years. I lived in a tiny apartment, ate ramen noodles, and pitched to every investor who would listen. And you know what kept me going? Knowing that someday I'd be strong enough to make you all see what you threw away. My father finally found his voice. So this is revenge. No, Dad, this is business. Isn't that what you always taught us? Never let emotions cloud your judgment. I picked up my briefcase. Harrison Technologies is failing. Phoenix Industries can save it. The fact that I get to do it, that's just, what did you use to call it? A fortunate business opportunity. As I turned to leave, Jessica caught my arm. Wait, what's going to happen to us? To our jobs? I looked at my sister, really looked at her. The golden child who'd had everything handed to her. Who'd never had to fight for anything in her life. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. That depends, I said. Are you willing to earn your position for once? Before anyone could respond, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Marcus, right on schedule. I have to take this, I said, stepping into the hallway. Marcus? How did the board calls go? Better than expected, he reported. Most of them are already on board with the merger. They've seen the numbers. They know Harrison Tech can't survive without outside intervention. Good. And the press release? Ready to go after Tuesday's meeting. The business papers are already speculating about a possible buyout. Your father's mismanagement and Jessica's failed product launches have made it an easy sell. I ended the call and turned to find my mother standing in the doorway. You've thought of everything, haven't you? She asked softly. I had to, I replied. You all taught me that nothing less than perfection was acceptable. She flinched. We were wrong, Olivia. About so many things. Yes, you were. Is there any way to fix this? I studied her face, the same face that had watched silently as my father destroyed my life 15 years ago. Fix what, Mom? The company? The family? Some things can't be fixed. They can only be rebuilt, and rebuilding requires change. Back in the study, my father had moved to the window, staring out at the gardens where he'd once taught Jessica and me about the importance of the Harrison legacy. What are your terms? He asked without turning around. For the company? They're in the merger documents. For the family? I paused. That's more complicated. Jessica looked up from where she'd been reading the merger papers. You're not firing everyone, are you? There are people who depend on those jobs. Unlike you, I actually care about the employees, I said. Anyone who's qualified and willing to adapt will have a place in the new organization. But there will be changes. Big ones. And us? She asked quietly. That depends on you. Are you willing to start at the bottom? Learn the business properly? Prove you deserve your position? She nodded slowly. I think I need to. Good, because that's your only option if you want to stay with the company. My father turned from the window. And me? You'll be offered a position on the board, non-executive, no direct management role. Your years of experience could be valuable, but you won't be running things anymore. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. For the first time in my life, I saw Richard Harrison accept defeat. The board meeting is at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, I said, gathering my things. I suggest you all be prepared. As I reached the door, my mother called out, Will you stay for dinner? I turned back, looking at my family, really looking at them. My father, proud but defeated. Jessica, scared but finally understanding. My mother, hopeful but uncertain. No, I said softly, not tonight. We have too much history for casual family dinners. But maybe someday. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings and preparations. Marcus kept me updated on the board members' responses. Most were enthusiastically supporting the merger, seeing it as their best chance to salvage their investments. On Monday evening, as I sat in my hotel room reviewing the final presentations, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Can we meet? Just us? I considered ignoring it, but something made me respond. Lobby bar, 30 minutes. She was already there when I arrived, nursing what looked like a very expensive glass of wine. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. What do you want, Jessica? She took a deep breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry, not just for now, but for then. For not standing up for you when Dad threw you out. For taking everything without questioning it. For being exactly who they wanted me to be instead of who I should have been. I signaled the bartender for a drink. And you're just realizing this now? No, she admitted. I've known for years that I was in over my head. That I wasn't cut out for this. But I was too proud, too scared to admit it. So what changed? You did. Seeing what you've built, how strong you've become, it made me realize what real leadership looks like. I studied my sister, looking for any sign of manipulation. But all I saw was exhaustion and genuine regret. You know things can't go back to how they were, I said finally. I know, I don't want them to. I want to learn, really learn from the ground up. Will you teach me? The next morning, I stood before the Harrison Technologies Board of Directors, my father and sister seated among them. As I presented Phoenix Industries' vision for the merged companies, I couldn't help but appreciate the symmetry of the moment. 15 years ago, in this same room, my father had told me I wasn't worthy of the family business. Now I was showing him exactly what he'd thrown away. The vote was unanimous. By noon, Harrison Technologies was officially part of Phoenix Industries. As the board members filed out, my father approached me. You've won, he said simply. This isn't about winning, Dad. It's about fixing what's broken, in the company and maybe, eventually, in the family. He nodded slowly. I underestimated you. I was wrong. Yes, you were. The question is, what are you going to do about it now? He straightened his shoulders, and for a moment, I saw the man who had once taught me about business before pride and prejudice had poisoned everything. I'm going to watch my daughter run the company I should have trusted her with 15 years ago, he said, if she'll let me. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was a start. 6 months later, I sat in what had once been my father's office, now my secondary workspace when I was in Boston. Jessica was presenting her analysis of a potential new product line, work she'd done from the ground up, starting as a junior analyst. The market research suggests a strong demand, she concluded, but we need to address these production challenges. I watched my sister confidently handle questions from the team, showing a grasp of details she'd never bothered with before. She was learning, growing, becoming the businesswoman she could have been years ago if she hadn't been handed everything too easily. After the meeting, she lingered behind. That went well, right? It did, I agreed. You've come a long way in 6 months. Thanks to you, she said quietly, for giving me a chance I probably didn't deserve. Everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves, Jessica. Even spoiled little sisters who take 15 years to grow up. She laughed, a real laugh, not the artificial one she perfected for society parties. Mom asked me to remind you about Sunday dinner. I've been to exactly 2 family dinners in the past 6 months. They were still awkward, still heavy with unspoken words and lingering hurt. But they were also something else, a beginning. Tell her maybe, I said. I have a lot of work to do. You always have a lot of work to do, Jessica pointed out. But maybe that's not all there is to life. Maybe sometimes family dinner is just family dinner. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. The entitled princess was gone, replaced by someone more real, more substantial. Maybe, I agreed. We'll see. Later that evening, as I worked late in the office, I found myself looking at an old photo I kept in my desk. Me and Jessica as children, before expectations and favoritism had torn us apart. We were smiling, arms around each other, unaware of the years of pain and separation ahead. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Board reports show Key 3 profits up 40% since merger. Harrison Tech Division exceeding all projections. I smiled, thinking about how far we'd all come. My father was learning to be a board member instead of a dictator. Jessica was earning her place instead of expecting it. Even my mother was finding her voice, slowly but surely. And me? I was learning that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's showing people exactly what they missed out on, and then maybe giving them a chance to make it right. I picked up my phone and texted Jessica, "Tell Mom I'll be there Sunday, but I'm not staying long." Her reply came quickly. "Long enough for dessert? She's making your favorite chocolate cake." I thought about our mother, trying so hard to rebuild bridges with chocolate cake and Sunday dinners. About my father, swallowing his pride to learn from the daughter he'd once dismissed. About Jessica, working her way up from the bottom with no complaints. Fine, I texted back, but only because of the cake. Some might say I'd won. I had the company, the success, the vindication. But sitting there, looking at that old photo and thinking about Sunday dinner, I realized something important. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in defeating your enemies, but in giving them the chance to become something better, even if it takes 15 years and a corporate takeover to get there.
I never planned to keep my success a secret from my husband's family. That choice was made for me the first time I met my mother-in-law, Diana Sterling, at their sprawling mansion in Newport Beach. I'd driven there in my old Honda Civic, wearing a simple sundress from Target, holding a homemade apple pie. Looking back, I should have known from her expression, that slight curl of her lip, the dismissive once-over, exactly what kind of woman she was. "So this is the girlfriend Thomas won't stop talking about," she'd said, emphasizing girlfriend like it was a dirty word. "I must say, when he mentioned you were a business major, I expected someone more polished." I'd smiled politely, used to people underestimating me. At 25, with my petite frame and casual style, I didn't look like your typical CEO. "It's wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Sterling. Tom's told me so much about you." She barely touched the pie, setting it aside with 2 fingers like it might bite. "Has he told you about our family status in Newport Beach? The Sterling name carries certain expectations we don't usually associate with." She paused, eyes lingering on my modest dress. "People from your background." If she'd known then that I was Lauren Chen, founder and CEO of TechFin Solutions, one of the fastest growing financial technology companies in California, she might have changed her tune. But Tom had fallen in love with me, believing I was just a mid-level manager, and I'd wanted to keep it that way until I knew his love was genuine. "Mother," Tom had interrupted, appearing in the doorway. "Please don't start." But Diana Sterling was just getting warmed up. That first meeting set the tone for what would become 2 years of subtle jabs, backhanded compliments, and increasingly bold attempts to break us up. When Tom proposed 6 months later, Diana's campaign against me intensified. Darling, she'd cornered me at the engagement party she'd grudgingly thrown, champagne glass in hand. "I assume you'll be signing the prenup? We can't have gold diggers trying to claim the Sterling fortune." I'd signed it without hesitation, much to her surprise. Let her think I was after their money. It was easier than explaining that my net worth was triple theirs. The wedding was a lavish affair, planned entirely by Diana to showcase the Sterling family's wealth. I let her have her way, watching with quiet amusement as she spent thousands on flowers and ice sculptures, insisting on showing everyone that even her son's unfortunate choice of bride wouldn't prevent her from throwing the society event of the season. It was after the honeymoon that things really took a turn. "Since you're not working anymore," Diana announced one morning, showing up unannounced at our new house, which she'd insisted we buy in her neighborhood, "you'll be expected to maintain certain standards as a Sterling wife." I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been secretly reviewing quarterly reports. "I'm still working, Mrs. Sterling." She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Oh, darling, surely you don't think Tom actually wants his wife working some little office job? Sterling wives don't work. They manage the household, organize charity events, and most importantly," her eyes narrowed, "they know their place." What followed was a detailed list of my new duties, everything from hosting dinner parties to joining the right country club committees. When I tried to protest, she dropped her bomb. "Thomas agrees with me completely. Don't you, darling?" Tom, who just walked in, looked uncomfortable but nodded. "Mother knows best about these things, Lauren. It's tradition." And so began my double life. To my mother-in-law's satisfaction, I appeared to quit my job. In reality, I continued running my company remotely, scheduling video calls during her precious charity meetings and reviewing contracts while she thought I was at yoga classes. Diana's demands grew more outrageous by the day. She'd show up unannounced, inspecting the house with white gloves, criticizing everything from the way I folded towels to how I arranged flowers. If you can't afford a proper housekeeper, she'd sniff, "You'll have to learn to do things correctly yourself." Tom, caught between his controlling mother and his wife, tried to play peacemaker. "She means well," he'd say after particularly harsh criticism. "She just wants what's best for us." But even he seemed shocked when Diana announced she was moving in temporarily to properly train me in being a Sterling wife. "The help these days is so unreliable," she declared, directing movers with her precious antiques. "And since Lauren insists on playing housewife herself, she clearly needs guidance." That first week was hell. Diana criticized my cooking. "Too ethnic." My cleaning. "Didn't your mother teach you anything?" And even the way I spoke. "Sterling wives don't use contractions, dear." The breaking point came during a dinner party she insisted on hosting at our house. I'd spent days preparing, following her exacting standards, only to have her announce to her society friends, "You'll have to forgive the amateur presentation. My daughter-in-law comes from simpler stock. We're trying to civilize her, but you know what they say about silk purses and sow's ears." The table tittered with polite laughter. Tom shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. I smiled serenely, excused myself, and went to my home office. It was time to make a call. You see, what Diana didn't know was that 6 months ago, my company had secretly begun buying shares in Sterling Industries, the family company that her husband, Tom's father, had run into the ground. Their financial troubles were well hidden from Newport society, but not from someone with my resources. I picked up my phone and dialed my CFO. Sarah, it's time. Execute Operation Sterling. The next morning, as Diana was instructing me on the proper way to arrange breakfast pastries, her phone rang. The color drained from her face as she listened. What do you mean? Hostile takeover, she shrieked. Who? How dare they? I calmly sipped my coffee, watching her world crumble. Within hours, the news would break that Sterling Industries had been acquired by Techfin Solutions. The stock they'd been desperately propping up would plummet, and their carefully hidden financial house of cards would collapse. But that was just the beginning of my revenge. That afternoon, chaos erupted at our house. Robert Sterling, Tom's father, burst through the door, his usually perfectly styled hair disheveled, his designer suit wrinkled. Diana, he shouted, waving his phone. Have you seen the news? We're ruined. Diana was still pacing the kitchen, making frantic calls to their financial advisor. She whirled on her husband, face contorted with rage. How could you let this happen? All our money, our status, our reputation. I continued preparing lunch as if nothing was happening, hiding my smile as I sliced vegetables for a salad. The CEO of Techfin Solutions, Robert, collapsed into a chair, loosening his tie. They've been planning this for months, buying shares through shell companies, waiting until we were vulnerable, but no one knows who they are. This mysterious L. Chen. I chose that moment to speak up. Actually, it's Lauren Chen. The kitchen fell silent. Diana and Robert stared at me, uncomprehending. What did you say? Diana whispered. Lauren Chen, CEO and founder of Techfin Solutions. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel, one Diana had criticized for not being Egyptian cotton. That's me. The silence stretched for another moment before Diana let out a harsh laugh. Don't be ridiculous. You're just a gold digger who got lucky with my son. You can barely organize a dinner party, let alone run a company. That's when Tom walked in, carrying a thick folder. His face was pale, but his eyes held a new understanding. She's telling the truth, Mother. I just came from the office. Lauren Chen has been on Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Techfin Solutions is worth billions. That's impossible. Diana shrieked. She drives a Honda. She shops at Target. She makes her own pie. Yes, I said calmly. I do all those things. Because unlike some people, I don't measure worth by designer labels or family names. I built my company from nothing, working 18-hour days, while putting myself through college. I earned everything I have. Robert's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. Why? Why would you hide this? Why would you pretend to be ordinary? Because I wanted Tom to love me for who I am, not my bank account. I turned to my husband, heart racing. This was the moment I'd been dreading. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, Tom. I was going to, but then I met your mother, and I saw how she treated people she thought were beneath her. I wanted to know if you were different. Tom was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Then, to my surprise, he started laughing. This explains so much. The mysterious work calls, the yoga classes that left you energized instead of tired, how you never seemed bothered by Mother's comments about money. Thomas, Diana screeched. This is not funny. She's destroyed us. No, Mother. Tom's voice turned stern. You destroyed yourself. With your prejudice, your cruelty, your obsession with status. Lauren just exposed what was already rotten. Diana crumpled into a chair, her perfect makeup streaking with tears. What will people say? What will happen to us? That depends, I said, pulling out my laptop. I have a proposal. I opened a document and turned the screen toward them. Sterling Industries can be saved, but there need to be changes. First, Robert steps down as CEO. The company will be restructured under TechFund's umbrella with new management and transparency measures. Robert nodded numbly, knowing he had no choice. Second, I continued, the Sterling Foundation's charitable works will be audited and reformed. No more using it as a personal slush fund, Diana. Real charity, helping real people. Diana flinched but didn't argue. Third, and most importantly, you both will attend weekly therapy sessions to address your classist behavior and family dynamics. If you want to maintain any relationship with your son and access to your remaining assets, you'll learn to treat people with respect, regardless of their perceived social status. And if we refuse, Diana's voice was barely a whisper. Then the merger proceeds as planned. Sterling Industries is dissolved, and you lose everything except what's in your prenup, Mother. Tom answered for me. I suggest you take the deal. Watching Diana and Robert sign the agreement was deeply satisfying, but not as satisfying as what came next. 2 weeks later, at the first charity gala after the takeover, Diana had to stand beside me as I was introduced as the CEO of TechFin Solutions and the new chairwoman of the merged companies. The whispers and stares from her society friends were delicious. But you always said your daughter-in-law was a simple housewife. Mrs. Vanderton commented loudly. Didn't you make her work as your maid? Diana's face flamed red. I may have misunderstood some things. Some things. Tom joined us, putting his arm around my waist. Mother, why don't you tell them about Lauren's latest acquisition? Or her plans to establish a scholarship foundation for underprivileged students? Over the next year, things changed dramatically. Robert, freed from the pressure of maintaining appearances, actually thrived in his new advisory role. The company's ethical reforms and innovative direction under my leadership made it more profitable than ever. Diana's transformation was slower, but perhaps more meaningful. The therapy sessions revealed deep insecurities about her own humble beginnings. She'd come from a middle-class family and had spent her life overcompensating. Gradually, she learned to value people for who they were, not what they owned. One morning, she showed up at our door holding a pie. I made it myself, she said hesitantly. The therapist suggested I try doing things I used to criticize you for. It's probably not as good as yours. It looks perfect, I said, letting her in. Would you like to stay for coffee? She paused in the doorway. Lauren, I'm sorry. For everything. I know, I smiled. That's why I'm going to teach you my secret apple pie recipe. Tom found us in the kitchen hours later, covered in flour and laughing as Diana tried to crimp the edges of her second attempt. I don't deserve this kindness, she said suddenly, becoming serious. Everyone deserves a second chance, I replied, even sterling wives who don't use contractions. She laughed at that, a real laugh, not the society titter she perfected over the years. Later that night, as Tom and I got ready for bed, he asked, Do you regret any of it? Hiding who you were, letting Mother treat you that way. I thought about it. No, It taught me something important. True worth isn't in a bank account or a family name. It's in how you treat people, especially when you think they have nothing to offer you. "You're amazing," he said, pulling me close. "I'd love you if you were a billionaire or broke." "Good," I smiled, "because I'm about to spend a ridiculous amount of money on a new initiative to help women start their own businesses. Want to help?" "Always," he grinned. "But maybe we should get Mother involved too. She's got surprisingly good business instincts when she's not trying to maintain appearances." And that's how the Sterling Chin Women's Business Initiative was born, turning my revenge into something bigger than just teaching my mother-in-law a lesson. Now we help other women prove that you should never judge anyone by their cover or their choice of pie dish. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving people wrong, it's helping them become better.
The steady beep of hospital monitors filled the silence as I sat beside my father's bed. 3 weeks since the stroke, and the doctors weren't optimistic. At 58, Dad had seemed invincible, a successful real estate developer who'd built an empire from nothing. Now he lay here, unable to speak, while my stepmother Victoria circled like a vulture. My name is Rebecca Mitchell, and at 29, I was about to lose the only parent I ever truly known. My mother died when I was 2, and for years it had been just Dad and me. Then Victoria came along 5 years ago, younger, beautiful, and according to Dad, a breath of fresh air in our lives. I knew better. "Shouldn't you be at work?" Victoria's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. She stood in the doorway, perfectly manicured in designer clothes that my father's money had bought. "I'm taking some time off," I replied, not looking away from Dad. "He needs family here." "Family," she scoffed. "I'm his wife. I can handle this." Before I could respond, Dad's heart monitors started beeping frantically. Medical staff rushed in, pushing us both aside as they worked to stabilize him. "Clear the room," a nurse ordered. In the hallway, Victoria pulled out her phone, speaking in hushed tones. I caught fragments, "lawyer," and "changes," and "today, if possible." My stomach turned. She wasn't even waiting for him to die before making her move. 2 days later, Dad was gone. The funeral was a blur of faces and condolences, but I couldn't take my eyes off Victoria. She played the grieving widow perfectly, dabbing at carefully made-up eyes with a silk handkerchief. But I saw her checking her phone during the eulogy, probably talking to her lawyer again. The reading of the will was scheduled for the following week. I spent those days going through Dad's home office, looking for any clue about his true wishes. He'd always been meticulous with paperwork, keeping everything organized and documented. But something was wrong. Files were missing. Key documents about his business holdings, property deeds, and most importantly, his original will, all gone. Looking for something, Victoria stood in the doorway, a familiar smirk on her face. "Just organizing Dad's things," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Don't bother," she replied, examining her perfect nails. "The lawyer has everything needed for tomorrow, though you might want to prepare yourself for disappointment." The threat in her voice was clear, but she didn't know what I knew. Didn't know that 6 months ago, Dad had pulled me aside after a family dinner, his face serious. "Becky," he'd said, using my childhood nickname, "I need you to know something. If anything happens to me, don't trust the paperwork. Trust this." He pressed a small key into my hand. "Safe deposit box at First National. Everything that matters is there." I kept the key hidden, not understanding its importance until now. The next morning, hours before the will reading, I visited the bank. The safe deposit box contained exactly what I'd hoped. Dad's real will, dated just 2 months ago, along with documentation of all his assets. But there was something else, a USB drive with a sticky note. "Watch me first." I plugged it into my laptop and felt my breath catch. It was security camera footage from Dad's home office, showing Victoria late at night, practicing Dad's signature over and over. Another clip showed her removing documents from his files. The timestamp was 3 days after his stroke. "Oh, Victoria," I whispered, "you should have checked for cameras." Dad had installed them after some papers went missing last year. He never told her about them. At 2 p.m. sharp, I walked into the lawyer's office. Victoria was already there, wearing black like the widow she was pretending to be. Her lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Gregory, sat beside her with a document folder. "Let's begin," the family lawyer, Mr. Peterson, said gravely. "I have here the most recent version of Harold Mitchell's last will and testament, dated 1 week ago." Victoria's smirk widened as he began to read. "According to this will, she got everything: the business, the properties, the accounts. I got nothing. This is clearly my husband's final wish," Victoria said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. He wanted to ensure his wife was taken care of. I stayed silent, waiting. "If there are no objections," her lawyer began. "Actually," I said, pulling out my laptop, "I have something you all need to see." Victoria's face paled as the security footage played on my laptop. Every late-night visit to Dad's office, every practice forgery, every stolen document, all captured in perfect clarity. "This is absurd," her lawyer sputtered. "This footage could be doctored." "It's not," I said calmly, pulling out the documents from the safe deposit box. "And this is my father's real will, dated 2 months ago, along with notarized copies of all his business documents." Mr. Peterson examined the papers carefully. "These appear to be legitimate. The signatures match our records, and the notary stamps are verified." Victoria stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. "You little bitch," she hissed. "You think you're so clever? Your father wanted me to have everything. I was there for him, not you." "Really?" I pulled up another video file. This one showed Dad in his office 3 months ago, talking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this," his recorded voice filled the room, "then something's happened to me, and Victoria's tried exactly what I feared she would. Becky, honey, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything, but I needed proof. Victoria's been stealing from the company for months, forging my signature, siphoning funds to offshore accounts. I've been gathering evidence, working with forensic accountants. It's all in the USB drive." Victoria lunged for my laptop, but security was already entering the room. I called them before the meeting, knowing exactly how this would play out. "Mrs. Mitchell," a detective said, stepping forward, "we need you to come with us. We have some questions about several fraudulent transactions flagged by the SEC." As they led her away, she turned back to me, her perfectly made-up face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this. I'll destroy everything he built." "No," I said quietly, "you won't." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. The forensic audit Dad had ordered revealed the full scope of Victoria's schemes. She'd stolen over $10 million through fake contracts and forged documents, all while planning her final coup, taking everything once Dad was gone. But Dad had been smarter than she realized. He documented everything, building an airtight case. The real will left the business and most assets to me, with specific provisions for long-term employees and charitable causes Dad had supported. Victoria got nothing. One morning, as I sat in Dad's old office, my office now, Lisa, our longtime secretary, brought in a package. "This was in your father's personal safe," she said softly. "He asked me to give it to you after everything was settled." Inside was a leather journal and a letter. "Dear Becky, if you're reading this, then our plan worked." Yes, our plan. I knew about Victoria's schemes months ago, but I needed to catch her in the act. The stroke wasn't part of the plan. I'm sorry for putting you through that worry, but I knew you were strong enough to handle what needed to be done. I watched you grow into an incredible woman, Becky. Smart, determined, and most importantly, honest. Victoria thought she could outmaneuver us because she believed we were too trusting. She never understood that true strength comes from integrity, not deception. The journal contains everything I learned building this company, not just business strategies, but life lessons. Use it well. Make it better. And remember, I'm so proud of you. Love, Dad. I wiped tears from my eyes as Lisa brought in another visitor, Agent Sarah Morrison from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. "We have something you need to see," she said, opening her laptop. Victoria wasn't working alone. Agent Morrison's revelation hit like a thunderbolt. On her screen was a complex web of financial transactions, all linking back to one name I knew too well: Gregory Walsh, Victoria's lawyer. "He's been orchestrating similar schemes across multiple estates," Morrison explained. "Victoria was just his latest partner." I studied the evidence: dozens of wealthy families targeted, millions stolen through forged documents and fake wills. Gregory had perfected the art of finding vulnerable marks, recent widows, estranged children, families in turmoil. Victoria had been both his protege and accomplice. "We've frozen their accounts," Morrison continued, "but there's still money missing. Around $30 million spread across various offshore holdings." I leaned back in Dad's chair, thinking. "The art collection," I said suddenly. Victoria was obsessed with Dad's art collection. She kept pushing him to have it reappraised last year. Morrison's eyes lit up. "For insurance purposes?" "Supposedly." I pulled up the company's records. "But look at the appraisal firm, Atlas Fine Arts Consulting." A few keystrokes brought up the company details. Atlas was a shell corporation created 3 years ago. Its owner? A holding company registered to Gregory Walsh. They weren't just stealing money, I realized. They were laundering it through fake art appraisals. The investigation expanded rapidly. The FBI uncovered a network of shell companies, each playing a role in Gregory and Victoria's scheme. They'd been planning this for years, building a facade of legitimacy while systematically looting estates. Victoria, facing multiple federal charges, finally broke. She agreed to testify against Gregory in exchange for a reduced sentence. The day of her plea hearing, I went to see her in custody. She looked different without the designer clothes and perfect makeup, older, smaller. "Why?" I asked simply. She laughed bitterly. "You want to know why? Because men like your father make it so easy. They see a pretty face, a sympathetic smile, and they hand over everything. Gregory taught me that." "Dad saw through you," I reminded her. "He was smarter than you thought." "Yes," she admitted, her facade cracking slightly. "He was. And so were you. I underestimated both of you." As I turned to leave, she called after me. "The Monet in his study, it's fake. We switched it last year. The real one's in a storage facility in Geneva. Account details are in my phone." Back at the office, I stood looking at the painting, a peaceful garden scene that Dad had loved. Victoria's final attempt at redemption felt hollow, but it helped the FBI recover millions in stolen artwork. Gregory's trial made headlines. Lawyer mastermind behind multi-million-dollar estate fraud ring. He was sentenced to 20 years. Victoria got 8, plus millions in restitution payments. 1 year later, I sat in the same office reviewing quarterly reports. Dad's company had not just survived the scandal, it had thrived. We'd implemented new security measures, helping other families protect themselves from similar schemes. Lisa knocked on my door. "Ms. Mitchell, the new estate protection program is ready to launch." I smiled, looking at Dad's journal on my desk. We turned his documentation of Victoria's crimes into a template for identifying fraud, helping other families avoid the same fate. "Perfect timing," I said. "And Lisa, call me Becky." That evening, I visited Dad's grave, placing fresh flowers beside his headstone. The real Monet, recovered from Geneva, now hung in the company's lobby, a reminder that truth, like art, endures. "You were right, Dad," I said softly. "True strength does come from integrity." As I walked away, my phone buzzed. Another family reaching out for help protecting their legacy. Dad's lessons lived on, not just in his journal or his company, but in every family we helped safeguard from people like Victoria and Gregory. Sometimes the hardest betrayals lead to the most important missions. Mine was ensuring that no other family would have to fight as hard as we did to protect what mattered most.